You've got your lesson ready. Your leaders are lined up, slides prepped, snacks bought, everything ready to go, game laid out. But the students?
They're scattered. Travel sports, homework, rehearsals, and some of them just don't show up at all.
So today we're going to ask the question, can we really disciple students who barely show up anymore? The answer is yes, but you're going to have to think a little differently about it to do it.
I believe that we stand on the verge of a historic moment.
You ask them what it is about rock and roll music that they like, and the first thing they'll say is the beat, the beat, the beat.
I found pardon for my past, power for the present, bright prospect for the future.
If you talk to the average teenager of today, I know what it does to you.
That could have an unparalleled and unprecedented impact.
I've got a story to tell. Have you?
Well, welcome to the Shaping Student Ministry podcast, where we help you lead students with purpose without burning out. I'm your host, John Oliver, and today we're jumping into a topic every student pastor I know has felt deeply. What do we do when attendance is inconsistent, but our calling to make disciples hasn't changed?
Well, we get back down, John, to this idea of the tension that we feel with all of this as student pastors, because all pastors feel this, even if you're a student pastor. Like, if you don't have attendance, you probably don't have a paycheck, right? And so, like, there is always this push, and maybe it takes away maybe it can take away the purity of some of why we do what we do. But I don't really know if I buy that, because Paul says we deserve to get a wage for what we do. And so there is always a tension that you want people to show up. But I believe that the reason most of us do that is because we genuinely just want people to hear God's word. So don't hear what I'm not saying and all that.
Yeah.
But there is absolutely, but the problem is that desire often turns into comparison, which then fuels us to do things we wouldn't normally do, or to have thoughts that we shouldn't normally have. And when students don't show up, then it becomes, well, how do I get them to show up? How do I draw them in? Oh man, I don't know if I have enough, as many as this guy. Did these people steal my kids? And I think that we lose a missional edge. And I think we got to shift that, because I don't think Jesus wasn't standing at the door of the synagogues waiting for people to come and hear him preach. So there's absolutely a difference between how missional we are and what that looks like versus what a lot of church culture and just culture in general pushes us to believe. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and I think too, one of the dangers, and we may talk about this in a little bit, or we may talk about it now, but one of the things that I think I see guys making a mistake of is, sometimes I'll talk to guys that have smaller student ministries, and, the question is, because this is the question you ask, well, like, how many students did you have on Wednesday?
Right.
I've gotten to where I quit asking that question.
Yeah.
Because that's not the mark of success. Like, the mark of success is not what was your seating capacity. Mark of success is like, hey, did you faithfully handle the text? Did students who were in the room and on the sideline, did they have somebody say their name kindly? Because we want students to show up. But the problem is, so many student pastors are so worried about the students who didn't show up, that they're missing out on the ones that they have in the room. But to the point that we're talking about right now, we all want students to show up.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the reality is, these kids and their families are exhausted. Like, I remember, so I'm kind of dating myself at this point, but 20 years ago when I was in high school, like, our community, we just didn't do anything on Wednesday nights.
Yeah.
We didn't do anything on Sunday nights.
In a lot of communities, it used to be, it was just sacred time. Like, that's just, you just didn't do it. So,
but the time of sacred time has gone away, because it has given way to, sports. It's given way to clubs. It's given way.
Now we think sports and clubs are sacred. Like, the sacred time has stayed, but like, we've shifted what's sacred.
Yeah,
right?
That's a good word. We have just shifted the things that we have and hold sacred.
But I don't want, here's my thing. This is where I'm not saying you're going here, but I don't want us to go here, because this is where we always go. And I get it, because
it's not a sports issue.
No, right. I've drummed this though, but so often we're like, well, we need to, if we tell people that it's bad that they're doing it, and we just keep telling the people that did come that aren't making those decisions that it's bad, we'll get people that aren't even listening to us and don't care to come in. And there is this odd disconnect. And I genuinely don't know if Jesus, this is a really good challenge I had from a friend of mine the other day, that, Jesus is much more in our lives. If he's the center of our lives, he's like a gravitational pull often than anything else. Like, and that gives a lot more, I think, biblical grounding to the areas of like, yeah, it's okay if you don't make it occasionally at church to a meeting, because you are orbiting what is Jesus in the middle of your life. Like, there are moments where gravity pulls us away and pulls us closer, but that always the constant stays in the middle. The problem is we have taken the same mentality for what church used to be, which was give your entire social life. And that's the world I grew up in. My social life revolved around church. There was 20 hours a week worth of stuff to do at church, and I showed up for all of it. But now, and we were exhausted then.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Gen Z and Gen Alpha and the parents of them are exhausted, and they don't have time for church because they shifted what was an unhealthy affection anyway over to that. Because if it was healthy, what we were doing in the church, I think 20 years ago, we wouldn't have a problem today. And so, like, there are, whether it's mental health challenges because people are not there, there's more struggle with mental health today because I think we run at an exhausting pace, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But there's overscheduling, there's sports, there's family tensions, there's social fatigue. I mean, we are with people, but we're on our phones so much. I don't think we know how to socially be with people. And
I don't think we really know how to unplug. I mean,
no.
You see, one of the things I do every summer when we go on family vacation, all the people that are connected to me at church, they have my wife's cell phone number. If it's an emergency and they need to get a hold of me, they can just contact me through my wife. But I leave and I'll check my phone once a day or, whatever. But like, I leave my phone in my bag and it doesn't come out. And I just force myself to try to detox as much as possible for those 8 days that we're at the beach. And when I say detox, it's like detoxing, to get away from that thing and to get off of it, because you're so connected, yet you're not really connected. Like you're very aware of things going on.
You're connected, but you're not present. Right.
Very much so. Very much. And I do think that leads into the mental health issues, but I also think, and this is not really the topic for this podcast, but
it could be for the next one.
I also think that we're a little too quick to pull the trigger on mental health. I think that it can be one of those things where everything demands counseling. Not everything does. Well, not every 5-year-old that's struggling has anxiety. I think we're a little too quick.
Well, sorry, I was going to say, to your point, we're very closely approaching a world that nothing is important anymore because everything is a problem. Or everything is important, right? If we diagnose, we widen the spectrum so wide that
because it's an overdiagnosing culture. Everything has to have a label.
Culture. Yeah,
everything has to have a label. Everything has to fit in one of those bins.
Well, and there's this push of like resilience tells me that there's a triage to that we are letting go of. But honestly, I think because it's easier. This is what we need to get into the other topic, but we need to get into this one and talk about this next time. But it is absolutely, it's easier to live in a label than it is to fight against what that label is.
And to the point of the label, I think that if we're not careful, we can just label students to say students who come, students who are busy with sports, and we just label them as this kid has an idol of this. And it's just, we write them off because it makes it easier for us on our counting of attendance. And it's not that they don't care. Like, I think sometimes we label students that are busy as they don't care. It's that they don't know that they have the room. It's that they haven't figured out how Jesus fits into how the things that they do fit around Jesus. And instead they're trying to fit Jesus into their schedule. And so it's that whole idea. And
they're products of their parents. We don't churches aren't reaching. I mean, no, to your point, all of that's true. And within that, I think we are quick to blame students to make a decision that they're not really supposed to have to make. And that doesn't mean we don't disciple and push them. But I think to your point, it's, why would they know any different? They're told that every day at home. Like, parents are going to be the primary influence on their kids no matter what. So it's just interesting when we're not reaching families, we lose students.
Yeah. Well, and I think we have to get away from the idea that students are skipping Jesus. Right. And we have to come to the reality that they're just stuck in rhythms that don't work.
Yeah. Rhythms that crowd him out and that push him out. But I think that there is this, to that point, I think we often panic, and we don't need to panic. This isn't the first time in church history that there's been struggle or issue. We don't have to panic. We need to shift. We got to shift how we see it. And I think here's the thing.
Or pivot for people who like Friends.
Well, okay.
Here we go. Pivot. 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 Pivot.
You pivot, like if you're going to pivot in and we're talking about, the tension and all this, we tend to panic or we tend to go and attack it. And I think that the shift in that is we go to where people are. And we, what we usually do, and the reason it's not enough is that we normally default to trying harder to corral them into a room than we do anything else. Like, it's like, well, what do I need to do to draw people here? What do I need?
Well, and the worst,
head.
I think the worst thing though is like, so people do that. I think, I think that the shave the head thing, like I've been there, done that. I didn't shave my head, but I did shave my beard off. Didn't clear that with my wife, and that was a problem. But
it's always go ahead. Sorry.
But I was just saying, I think the other side of that is, and this is something that is a pet peeve of mine, is when the student does come,
right,
and the people in the room, the leader in the room goes, well, look who decided to show today, where have you been? I'd say, and it's different than going up to them and just saying, hey, I just want you to know, man, I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah.
And what's been going on in your life?
Well, and I'll tell you, we hold Jesus, and I'm going to speak this to our student pastors listening. So student pastors, just pastors in general, but specifically student pastors, there's some extremes we fall to. The overworky, overfocused guy, or the super lazy guy who's like, I don't know, man, I just show up here to eat nachos and hang out. Like, neither one of those are good. In the middle of that, though, I think that there is a real pressure from a lot of head pastors. I know it's not a pressure you feel. It's one that you've got to move out and let go of. And this is the pressure that pastors and Jesus, that Jesus was a very bad church growth strategist. He was a very bad church growth guy. And you say, well, wow, it's not, you get angry about it. No. Jesus had 120 people at one point. Then he had 12 people that he poured into. And then when thousands followed him and he had crowds, he went, no, you want the wrong thing. Go. Now, if that was any pastor today, they'd go, well, you got thousands, just try and reorient how they think. But Jesus wasn't interested in that. And so the point in all this, I think guilt messaging and we try and fix things with hype nights and attendance goals. And I know the weight of those things. I don't think hype nights are necessarily wrong, but when they are for the purpose of like, we don't get people into a building.
Yeah.
And so we set in our building planning more and more to get them in the building, but that's not what Jesus did.
Well, and we do trivia night. We do trivia nights, and those those are our hype nights or whatever. But the way that we build those, like those are not to drive attendance to get into the room.
Right.
Those are typically what we've done is we just wrapped a 12-week series. We just wrapped a 12-week study on doctrine, or we just wrapped an 8-week study on comparative religions, or an 8-week study on cults. And so what we're doing at that point is like, we're going to take a week. We're going to celebrate all of the things that we've done together. And those are our hype nights. Those are moments where we strategically pause and we kind of have that moment where Jesus has said, if you're going to follow me, eat my flesh and drink my blood. And people say, man, this is a really hard saying. Who can understand it? Right. So that's the kind of way that we structure Wednesday nights is like, man, that's a really hard teaching. Yeah. Who can follow it? Well, we're trying to do hard teaching and we're trying to follow it. But when we have some breaks, like that's when we're going to have our hype nights and our trivia nights. And the students look forward to those, not to drive attendance, but to just have fun. And so I think that's important. And what I hope you hear in that, student pastor and student leader, is we're not opposed to the hype night. We're not opposed to the fun night. but make it fit your strategy where you're celebrating something hard that you've walked through. And yeah, of course you want kids to bring their friends, but you want your kids to bring their friends too on the nights where you're talking about, hey, are you interested in in pneumatology? Are you interested in end times, all of those things? Like, I think that stuff matters.
Yeah. But I'm with you. I think the hard thing is that that the bar has been lowered so far to how we need to think as pastors and how we need to think as disciplers and people, that we are just peoples of extremes. Like, I think about James when it's being yanked by the wind. Like, every time if I post something and say, hey, dodgeball, it's not the way to reach people. Like, let's focus on relational discipleship. There's always a guy that goes, we do dodgeball, that's stupid. And they get mad about it. And the thing is, no.
It's weird also to see grown men get mad at you about saying dodgeball doesn't work. But I've seen it.
It's guys that, well, you know what's even weirder is that there are guys that built entire student ministry careers off things like dodgeball. And so, like, those that you're going after that. And I'm at this point where I'm like, hey, if you can hear what we're saying and hear it from a balanced perspective, I love fun stuff in student ministry. I love hype nights, but I can only love those things whereas they are balanced by doing the good, creative heart. And some guys that they think that there's something godly and sanctifying about being the driest, most boring jerk that gets up on stage to preach about theology. That's not good teaching either. Like, this idea of, I want to shepherd and engage and help my sheep feed, most importantly, and then I want to do things around that enhance that and let them see the joy of the community. And so, to your point, let's hear all of these things within balance. That yes, I had nights in student ministry where I had 600 kids for rodeo night. 600. That's bigger than the majority of churches in the country. But I didn't have many more than the kids that came the next week. All of a sudden, I dropped by 30% or 40%. Why? Because they moved the needle short term, but they didn't build long-term relationships or disciples. And that's what pastoring is knowing your sheep. We're not called to build events to get people in a building. We're called to build a kingdom and a family. And it's funny how, like, if your family only ever gets together when you're going to do an event, like, guys, we're having an event in 2 weeks. I know we all live together. We're just doing it. Well, there's no trust or growth there. It happens in those moments.
And typically that's when you have chaos.
That's
like,
100%
like when
right.
you go to, it's like when you go to family Christmas and they're like, all right, now be careful. Don't say anything political around your uncle because your uncle's going to say something and fly off the handle. Well, why should I be worried if my uncle knew, if I was connected to my uncle would kind of have an idea where I fall politically. We probably wouldn't even have that discussion. But if we did, it would be one of those things where that's not going to be my only interaction with him this year.
Well, no doubt. And in the longer, and we don't want to make those investments. And here's what I'm telling you, pastors. I think that every pastor here is going to say, this balance idea. We're all going to agree that it's more than attendance. We're all going to agree that it's about, relationships. We're all going to agree that you can't just build a whole ministry off of this. The question is, you can agree with that, but does your agreement in word match agreement in how you do ministry?
Mm.
And so when we say that, it's one thing to say, it's something to live it. And that brings us to kind of the ending moment for the last section of this before we go behind the wall, which is going to be live. So you need to sign up, by the way. You can get a 2-week free trial to join our community and just see what it's all about. So you need to go ahead and do that. But here, let's get a better lens for discipleship. Okay. Discipleship only happens in relationship. It doesn't happen. Adrian Rogers had a lot of good things to say. One of them was not, I'll disciple you from the pulpit. That's not discipleship. That's teaching. Excuse me. But number one, we've got to think smaller. And if anybody in here, some of you have not ever been in them, you like to have opinions on how everybody should grow their student ministry, but you've never grown one. And that's okay. But I need to explain to you that when you grow something up to 200, 300, 400, 500 students, like John and I've done before, you realize very quickly, if you don't want it all to fall away, that you have to grow smaller the more you go bigger. You have to equip more leaders to have small groups. You got to make sure people are invested individually, because you don't just come and draw a crowd.
That's right. Well, and I would say our student ministry at Rosemont has grown exponentially since I've been here, but it has grown because we have intentionally
because of your
taken
hype
steps.
I'm just kidding.
We've intentionally taken steps to
Yeah.
add leaders. I mean, I have 52 adult volunteers in my student ministry right now between Wednesdays and Sunday mornings
Yeah.
that serve different functions, different roles. You know, Martin Lloyd Jones said, I'm going to read this off my wall because I have it to remind me all the time.
Yeah.
But Martin Lloyd Jones said, preaching the word is the primary task of the church, the primary task of the leaders of the church, the people who are set in this position of authority. And we must not allow anything to deflect us from this, however good the cause, however great the need. And so I am always going to be the person who says, yes, the teaching that happens from the stage in the student ministry is the critical mass. Like that is the critical mass. However, because if the teaching's off, if the teaching's off, it's bad, right? So teaching matters. What you teach, how you teach, that matters. So you do need to work on that. But you also don't need to be so naive to think, like if you're sitting there and you're listening and you think the reason students show up is to hear you, you're an idiot. It's not. You are not the reason. If it is the reason, your ministry is not going to grow very much, because the reason that people come to your ministry is the people that are pouring into them.
Well, let's just look at it this way. You can have teaching aside from discipleship. You can't have discipleship aside from teaching, and teaching is not as key because we are giving them something to learn. Discipleship is when you take what you're learning and you learn how to apply it every day in your life.
That's right.
Right. And you have to have both of those work together, except for, so, and here's the difference. Like I'll tell you, at a church plant, so we've had huge ministries, but then we've had really small ministries. I have a small ministry right now because I'm a teaching pastor at a church plant. At one point, my student ministry, because of the culture here, it grew bigger than the church. But it was unsustainable because as we added people that build relationships, none of those kids wanted relationships. And I had leaders. And so the thing was, they came for the teaching and then they just moved on to the next thing when they wanted to move on to it. The kids that are staying and growing and doing the hard work and growing in the midst of that are hearing what we're doing. We have kids that don't know Jesus that are drawn. And that, but at the end of the day, we have a group that we've grown small and we've connected with them. So drawing a crowd doesn't equal discipleship. And so when you think smaller, we're going to get into this behind the wall, but man, 2-minute check-ins with them over voice text, or small moments over time that you're investing in kids, writing notes. You can't do any of those in and of themselves and be okay with it, but it's shifting.
It's drops in a bucket, not turning on a fire hydrant.
Well, absolutely. And the problem is when you turn on a fire hydrant, it don't stay in the bucket when you hit it because it all blows out. So those little things over time that we do consistently, if we'll think smaller on a personal level, that makes a difference. The second thing is use what they're doing. So often we want to meet people who are far from Jesus, and our first prerequisite to build a relationship is to tell them to change every single thing they've ever done. And that's not how we meet people. Like, it's to go, hey, this is your first time meeting me. Well, you don't need to be playing sports all the time. Change all that and come get me. Well, first, they don't know you and you're not that cool. So like, what is it that really changes things? Well, Romans 2:4. It's kindness that leads us to repentance. And you can't show people that you love them and how kind you are if you don't meet them where they are. Meet them at their practices, show up at their games, text them during breaks over, when they're on spring break, or
engage with them on social media.
Yeah.
I mean, students are digital natives. They love social media.
Yep.
Engage with them on social media.
I don't think that you need more time. I think you just need more attention.
Need to be more intentional.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%.
That is. And so use what we're going to have some more ideas on that later, and here's the third one before we close out. You have to redefine the win. And so we have got to move. John, you said it so well. And this is something I changed. We don't know as people. If I didn't say, John, how you doing today? And you go, man, I'm good. I'm just busy. Man, how's everything been going? Just busy. Well, I don't think if you were busy, you'd know what to say, right? Like, I'm not saying that about you personally, but like, that's how we interact. If we say these things out of habit, that eventually, because words have power, that are they just drum the wrong drum constantly. We're hitting the wrong drum. Instead of saying, man, how was church last night? Well, I had 35. Okay, how was church last night? Well, I had 100. Or hey, how many people you got in your ministry? That's always the question. I started asking people this question: what are you most excited about in your ministry right now?
Mm-hmm.
That's a change. If you intentionally make that, and it has absolutely changed the landscape for the conversations I have with student pastors, because I'm not signaling to them that what's most important is their number of kids. I'm just signaling to them that what's most important is what you love doing most in ministry.
Well, I had someone ask me a question the other day, and it kind of put me back on my heels a second because I wasn't anticipating the thoughtful question.
Yeah.
And I appreciate thoughtful questions. And they just said, hey, what's the big boulder you're pushing uphill right now?
Whenever you can throw a boulder into a conversation.
Yeah, well, which means,
like,
what's the thing you're working really hard to get accomplished? And you're meeting resistance, and it made me think for a second. And I appreciated that. And so
I like asking, like, what's working, or what are you working on most, or like what's something that's really, I had a great conversation with the guy the other day when he told me, I would have never gotten to that if I said, how's it going?
Yeah.
But I said, how, what's really working right now? What are you really loving? And it was this incredible answer that was encouraging to me. It's going to be encouraging to student pastors as we build resources to help with that. I mean, it's a good conversation, but it was based off of a question we don't normally hear.
Well, and I think too, it's kind of like Grad Sunday we talked about. You celebrate the things they have in common, not the things they're dreaming about being.
100%.
And so in the same way, if I'm meeting with a guy who had 5 students show up, number one, that's a big deal. They got FaceTime with 5 students that could have been doing any number of things, that chose to sit there and come to student ministry, or their parents said you have to go. But they had time to be there. They had time, FaceTime with those students. That's not the measuring stick of whether or not they had a good evening or not. Just like if I have 150, 200 students on Wednesday night, it's not a measuring stick if I had a good night or not. Because I've had really good nights with 20 kids, and I've had really bad nights with 220 kids.
It's funny when you shift the litmus test for what quality is. All of a sudden you go, I had a great night. I wish these kids had been there, instead of, man, this would have been a great night if more kids had been here. Right? Like, it changes everything. Like, it's
also the same. It's also the same, and points to the fact that we have a problem with what we measure ourselves against.
100%.
We constantly are measuring ourselves against the person to our right or the person to our left.
Yep.
And
or the guy that posted on social media that's a student pastor at something he didn't even build or work towards. He's just filling a vacancy. Like, but
the reality is, as believers in Jesus Christ, the thing that we ought to be comparing ourselves to and measuring ourselves against is never the person to our right or to our left. Is always at the foot of the cross. We measure ourselves according to the mercy that's been extended to us. And so we have to, again, redefine the win. The goal isn't attendance. Right. And so you've got to come up with the why behind your ministry, and are those things able to be accomplished? Right. For me, the things I can control every week to know if I've been faithful is, A, have I taught well? Have I faithfully taught what I've prepared? B, have I prepared my leaders to be able to effectively lead their small groups? Have I equipped them with the tools necessary to do that? And 3, am I doing my best to make sure that I'm speaking to as many students as I can kindly, as well as my leaders, and are we having conversations?
Yeah. We need to do a whole thing, by the way, on how full is your bucket. That's just an incredible book.
Yeah, it is good.
Well, listen, I've been a little saltier today than normal. I hope it doesn't get me in trouble.
I accidentally called a couple of y'all idiots. I'm sorry.
Well,
I don't mean it.
We only do it because we are idiot and we've been there.
Yeah, I've been there. I've been the guy that opens the door and says, "If you don't come, like."
I struggle to be that guy every day, but I think that I'm a little bit salty about some things, but I'm salty about this because here's why. It makes me frustrated that too many student pastors, student leaders, volunteers are living under the wrong set of tests for what is or isn't good. And it also drives me nuts. You need to hear the student pastors for head pastors. Your head pastor's not perfect. He's not anointed and never makes a mistake. The truth is, he's dealing with just as much stuff as you are. And sometimes he doesn't have a good set of standards. And you need to be able to respectfully say, hey, this is what I'm working on to do it. And I can't beat the culture because Jesus has already beaten it. And so it's supposed to free me to be able to go and love kids the way Jesus did and being able to explain why you're doing it. And so I want to tell you before, as we end out, a couple of quick things. One, I want to give a shout out to one of our faithful listeners, Jace Morrow, who commented last time on Senior Sunday. Jace is at First Baptist Wynnewood. And so anytime you comment, we want to do our best to let you know that we love you, that we care about you. Jace is the man. So I've met him in person. I hope one day we get to hang out and do more ministry together. Yeah, you know
Jace is the one you met.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jace, we took pictures together. He's got some of our merch. I love
Jace.
Other
than our wives, he's our fan.
He's one of our biggest fans.
Yeah.
And so listen, we keep growing in subscribers. We want you to subscribe, to like, to listen to what we're doing. But most importantly, give us 2 weeks free. Just give us 2 weeks to give you free stuff and to let you see our community, our downloads, our touch points, all of that. And we want so desperately for you to be a part of it, or even to buy our Lines curriculum and get all of the community included in that. Like, that's a big deal. So just click below, look at our website. It's shapingstudents.com/.
Lines is awesome, man.
It is.
Lines is awesome.
Listen, I'm not going to say some of the things that have been said, but they were good. Go on our website and read those referral quotes. So
yep.
Listen,
and just know that leader from LaGrange, Georgia is one of my leaders.
I know. I couldn't let him.
Yeah, he's one of my leaders. And he really did say it. He really did say it. So look, in part two, we're going to go deeper into the exact strategies you can start using this week to disciple students who rarely show up.
Yes.
And we'll talk about how to train your leaders, normalize pursuing students, and reframing discipleship for the real world. Again, if you are not in the SSM community yet, now's the time.
Why?
You get access.
We're the least expensive and highest quality. We tested all of our curriculum against all the major guys, and we beat them. We were a 9.2 out of 10. We beat them, most of them, by a point. Come on, man. We're way less expensive, and we're 10% better in every category. You can't beat that. So,
and if you hate it, it's okay to be wrong. You can go back to the other stuff.
And you didn't have to pay for being wrong. You had 2 weeks for free.
Except Lines. You got to pay for Lines. Well, I ain't giving you. We'll give you 3 sessions though.
We did a lot of work. That's a year's worth of work. But listen, we love you. We're excited. We will see you on the other side of the wall.